Hello, clean people. I love it when you're clean.
Actually, I had suggested we had just taped everything we did backstage for the last hour and a half, because that would have been a lot of good stories. But we have a lot to go over. The new album, Happiness Bastards, it's made me a very happy bastard. And the shows are cooking. But before we get to all of that, I really want to ask about the hot topic of the day, and I don't mean Dave Grohl's love child.
That's the only love child we know about.
Well, the other one is, did either of you see the Oasis reunion coming? Like, did you have any hard money on that?
I knew it was coming when I read about Noel's divorce. He's like, oh, my pile of shekels, it's much smaller.
One of the reasons I asked is because obviously you toured with Oasis. You know, you've got a relationship with Noel. And when I actually talked to Noel last year for my Sirius XM show, The Writer's Block, he categorically said, no, if you missed Oasis the first time around, get over it. Tough shit.
You know, I would probably, we should take the credit, I think.
Please do.
I didn't see it coming, to be honest. And we're still, I don't see Liam very much, but I'm pretty good friends with Noel. I'm just happy for them. I'm happy for the fans. Great rock and roll band. And so I could give you 300 million other reasons why they could do something like that. I mean, and number one is they're much older and mature now.
But when you toured with them, and I love the fact that it was called the Tour of Brotherly Love.
Cheeky.
That was... How much of your dynamic did you see in them, and did you ever get a chance to sort of talk about like how brothers work together or don't? Because one of the things people talk about bands as a family, that's like the thing that is almost the ideal. You look at a band like U2, they actually do act as a family. They're not related, but they grew up as if they were. But when you actually have blood dynamic in there, you're actually adding layers of emotional complexity, personal history that when you meet, friends in the neighborhood in the garage, you don't have that. You're actually starting from a much earlier point, and those things are going to play into the creativity
point.
as well. They'll play into the creativity as well as the drama. Did you recognize that in them as well? Like Rich? Go for it.
Why are you looking at me?
I'm trying to formulate.
I'm just happy you got the microphone close to your mouth.
I did, yes. To me, it's interesting because it adds a different dynamic. So, like, if you're, like you talked about U2, I would assume that they sort of set a family dynamic, and that family dynamic kind of worked the way it worked. But when you have brothers in a band, you have that, and sometimes it rubs against your actual real family dynamic, so it creates more of like a tornado or a whirlwind that isn't the most stable thing, possible. But it's, watching Oasis, and it was cool because they were in a really good place at that time, and Chris and I weren't in the best place.
No, but what's funny? I honestly think that, but that tour we actually were. We had a lot of social time. There was a lot of, we're always a pretty social band. After the show, I drive everyone crazy for many decades. I have to have music on all the time, and it's like, so we would always play records, and they're into records, so we all congregate in our dressing room and drinks and talking and screaming over loud records, and I think we kind of, canceled each other's negative shit out in a way. You know what I mean? And to me, or maybe it's just because of the way we are that we're never going to do what everyone expects. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of being creative people. And, I think Noel and Liam also, if there's anything alike, and this is kind of stuff we touched on before, you get into a band is also, you can't control your family. you can control some of that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And then if you're lucky enough to have success, and then all that kind of stuff is being thrown at you, you know, we're mid-century products from the Deep South. Our emotional vocabulary was not vast, and you know
Well,
what
I don't
mean?
think they're talking like that in Manchester either. So.
No. No, if they said what I just said, you wouldn't even understand what they said. But I think, I don't know. I think it's to be where we are today. You know what I mean? And again, you know, you talk to people and you can see, like, look, part of for us to be here today, we had to go through the stuff we had to go through unapologetically.
Yeah.
You know, we were just talking about, hey man, the founders of rock and roll, everyone that we love, they were
some kind of psycho.
psychotic. Everyone has an arrest record. Everyone was like wild. You didn't want them in your house. You know what I mean? They were like, Jerry Lee Lewis coming over? Are you kidding? I mean,
The other
I'd be
thing
fucking terrified. I would be so
is that
scared.
they
And
weren't
I'm
children
Southern.
of privilege either. A lot of them grew up in really hard
Of course.
environments, broken homes. So that a lot of the energy that goes into rock and roll is about reinvention. It's like you want to be the thing that you're not at that moment when the music hits you or some kind of inspiration strikes.
And that inspiration is important because now pragmatisms are like off the table. And now you're like, you know, living another lifestyle. You're like having, you know, again, all the things that you thought are on the other side of the velvet curtain. Pay no attention to the man behind the green curtain. Now you're that man. Now you're back there. And you have to do, you know, the growing up part is like the hardest bit.
It's also interesting because when you talk about brothers and bands, you look at the Kinks, Ray and Dave. Ray is the singer, the songwriter, and effectively the leader. Dave was a brilliant contributor, but he doesn't have the same stature, at least in public. You look at Oasis, Noel was essentially the leader, the songwriter, and Liam was the voice and the attitude that gave,
And the eyebrow.
and he projected what needed, well, he projected what was needed to get it out there. You're in a situation where you're both songwriters. You're really much more, there's actually an integrated exchange in what you do, which I think is a little different from what the Kinks would have done, or, you know, Ray would bring a song in. Noel brings a song in.
I think you're right, and I think more than ever, where we are today, especially with like this last record, would be having the most clearly defined, you know, look at that in terms of course, you know, ambition doesn't necessarily always mean like financial or fame or whatever. Your ambition can be your aesthetic, you know, my ambition to have depth as a songwriter.
Your ambition to discover.
Exactly. And so that would have led us, I mean, to, now I have some songs. I think our band should play some songs I've written. But come around full circle, and I think the reason that like Happiness Bastards is what it is, you know, Rich and I have definitely more me maybe than you, see so clearly like, oh, our great gift in this band is he writes the music, I write the lyrics and the melodies, and then we put it together.
So does it always start with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can elaborate.
You know, but what sort of generates what I feel is the sincerity in what Chris does and what we do is that it generates sort of whatever the song elicits, whatever the music elicits. I'll play it for Chris, and it'll pull something out of him. And if it doesn't, he won't write it.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing, because that means every time we write a song, he's actually moved by it, which means he's, you know what I mean? So there's that self-filter.
It also means when he says yes, that pushes your wall a little further out.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's been that way since the very first songs in Mr. Crow's Garden. I mean, and I've said it before, but She Talks to Angels is a great example of, you know, whatever that song was, whatever, I mean, we've written many songs, but it was just something about the riff. It could be one little thing that he plays that starts to dictate to me what I want to say lyrically.
When you say the riff, like what would have been the actual melodic component that started for you that you then handed to him?
It was really just the chord progression. And
well,
then,
open tuning.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Like opening up, I think, some things
Yeah,
for him.
I mean, when I first heard Nick Drake and just the way that guitar sounded, and it also brought me back to what we were talking about downstairs, is listening to, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and Stills would play in open tunings, and that there was just something about the sonic of that I was always drawn to.
We were talking about Peter Buck, too, from REM, and a lot of what he did, not necessarily in open tuning, but because he was playing a Rickenbacker, that jangle would have sort of almost overlapping harmonics because of the way it was amplified and just the tonality of that instrument.
And just his unique take on those arpeggios and the way he would do something like that, which is very...
The specific picking.
Yeah.
And so when I heard those, and our friend David Macias gave me that song and no reply, Time and No Reply,
Right.
And that was the first Nick Drake thing I'd heard, and the sound of that guitar hit me, like unlike anything else at that time. And so it's what drove my interest in open tunings. And so one of Chris's roommates was like, oh, well, that's open tuning. And he showed me open E. And that's how I started writing in it. And that was the song in open E. And so it was just something about the chord and the way all the strings worked together and the way the chord structure worked together. And you could do these things and certain strings would hang. And there was always these really far out, harmonics that were going on within a chord that just when it hit my ear, I was like, fuck, that's amazing. You know what I mean? It was really cool. So I remember writing it, and not that anyone else would maybe find this funny because it's kind of a guitar thing, but, I had my dad's guitar laying around, I had these things, but I got a weird guitar. The Robin.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote She Talks Angels on this weird electric guitar. It was called a Robin, but I was just, for some reason, each guitar had songs in it.
Yeah.
And you can connect in these songs, you know what I mean, with these guitars. So I remember writing it and then playing it for Chris, and he just took it.
But
and,
it's
and
the
just
same with,
became a
it's
part
the
of it.
same, like, the best, I think, of the things we've done, it's exactly works that way. Rich plays me some, that song, we wrote that song in 20 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, the stuff that's really, this new record, something like, Rats and Clowns.
Yeah.
Done. You know what I mean? He played me the riff. I was like, yeah, that's what I
It sounds like people I don't like, Rats and Clowns.
Well, it's like, yeah, of course. Oh, you've been seen downtown hanging with the Rats and Clowns, and it instantly comes to me when he plays me something that has that. What again? Like I said, it would be impossible. It's not you know what I mean? There's no scientific thing. I don't know. It's just
It's like intuitive chemistry.
And it's creation and it's inspiration.
Because there's also in Wanting and Waiting, which is also on Happiness Bastards, I love that really potent opening line, which has been a month of Sundays since I could fake a smile.
Yeah.
Which really says like a volume of frustration, dejection, trying to march through some kind of trouble or strife, or just feeling like you're getting nowhere fast. And it's just in those two lines, and the way that the song, the music, the guitar sets that up. Was that really sparked by what he played for you?
Of course.
Was that really the first line that you wrote out of it?
Yes. My process has changed over the years, because after you've written hundreds of songs, like when you see Bob Dylan in No Direction Home, he's like, when it was new, even Bob Dylan could sit down and just write. And that was more like, I can still do that. I probably take more, I will probably, because I've written a lot of songs and I don't really want to repeat the lyrics. And there's millions of songs out there and I don't want to repeat the other things that I've heard. So, you know what I mean? But again, and the first line is funny. The first line to me dictates everything. So once you have the first line in a song, Chris Diamond on Amorica, you know, that song is another one. He played me that song, and it was a weird time.
Yeah.
The mid-'90s, heroin chic. But just the whole world that we were living in. And but when he played me that, of course, I could open up whatever I need in terms of my relationship with language, and this kind of sadness would come out, an introspective melancholy. But I also think that, I personally think that even the song, any lyric that I've written, I cannot leave it bleak. I have to have something in there.
Well, you got to have some kind of joy. You got to have a payoff.
Exactly. And it's funny because
she does talk to angels. That's not actually a bad thing.
No, she survives these things. You know what I mean? It's not like she threw herself off the bridge into the river. That was
no, that would be Ode to Billy Joe.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What's the name of that bridge?
When you're writing...
Thank you.
How much of the writing for Happiness Bastards was done during, for, or after the tour for Shake Your Moneymaker? Because that tour was actually delayed because of, you know, COVID and all of that adventure. Like, how much of this record was written with the speed of coming off that kind of a tour, or how much of it was built on things that were hanging around?
The COVID whole trip, I mean, that was just, everyone had to deal with that. I mean, whatever, you know, we're still...
Because you were ready to start a tour, and then the whole thing went... I saw, actually, Rich, I saw you
I had all my outfits picked out.
when you were playing at the Beacon for Love Rocks, and it was literally the day everything shut.
Everyone had COVID at that thing.
I saw Jackson Browne at the Rolling Stones recently. That's right. And that's how it works in Los Angeles, by the way. But I said, "Oh, Jackson, you know, Chris," and I was like, "I haven't seen you since we did Love Rocks," and it was like Jackson Browne was like one of the first, like, kind of famous people or whatever, musician that we saw in the media that had COVID, and it said Jackson Browne has COVID, and it's me and him on a mic like, give me that sweet, sweet virus. Yeah, I was like, holy shit.
It was like a super spreader event. but how much of the writing was done while you waited, or from the energy of playing?
I think Rich had like a lot of pieces, you know, that he had been working on when, you know, we decided to wrap up, you know, Magpie and the CRB and stuff. So, but and so some songs we had, but I didn't find that time to be. I didn't feel like writing during that time. I need stimuli. I need travel. I need laughing. I need stuff happening. You know, I need adventure. You know, even if it's like in like this kind of poetic construct, even the most mundane thing or whatever, I need that personally as my fuel. I had a lot of influence, a lot of things, like we all did to get through, and we wrote some of those songs, but I think we kind of, and I like to keep things open-ended. You know, like the chorus, I had all the verses to Wanting and Waiting, but we didn't have the chorus, and we recorded the track, and I went home to the place I was staying in Nashville and wrote the chorus that night and came back and said, I got it. You know what I mean? So I need to kind of be in the thick of things. You know, I think one thing we do, it doesn't matter, it just is what it is Rich and I, as different as we are in our personalities, we both have gotten from point A to here tonight by the way shit feels. We're not, you know what I mean? We're not, there's a lot of cerebral stuff going on in our lives, you know, and interest stuff, but the music part, it has to feel a certain way. That's why I don't wear in-ear monitors. I can't, it doesn't feel right. We have live amps on stage. You might think, well, don't all bands? Like, they don't. I don't know if you know that. You know, you go see a lot of bands and they're great bands, they're great shows, everyone's having fun, but there's no music on the stage. They're playing through digital things that are just coming through the PA. So if you get, you know, opportunity to see maybe whatever band that you love, you're on the side of the stage and you don't hear anything except the bass, but the bass is coming through the PA as well. And the vocals, because they're in their ears, you know. So yes, it's old school, but it's also just the way he and I it has to feel a certain way.
Was there a certain quality to the performances on the Shake Your Moneymaker tour that directly fed into this album? Because really the first two songs on it, you know, you have Bedside Manners and then Rats and Clowns. You're coming out at 60, 90, 110 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You're not, this is not Wallflower stuff.
No. I think for me, most definitely. I mean, that was, I think
Would that have influenced like how you played guitar and just the tonality of it? Because there is a density to the guitar work, you know, right in those first two songs.
The thing about Shake Your Moneymaker is there's an efficiency to it.
Yeah.
And we kind of strayed from that. You know, I mean, like, Chris Diamond's not a pop single, you know what I mean? And so,
Really?
and so to play that record every night in its entirety, it really it made me appreciate it, because it was something we ran away from day one. You know, we made this record, we played it a couple of times at rehearsal. We're like, oh, we're fucking bored with this record before it even came out. You know what I mean? Not really, but
That's just how we were.
That's just how we were. We would keep writing, keep writing. But with this, I was like, I really grew to appreciate it, and I grew to think like, oh wow, there's the sort of the efficiency and the concise nature of those songs.
Focused.
You get in and you deliver and you get out, and that was really amazing to me. So I definitely took that when we sat down and started writing.
Because also Moneymaker, the live album and the shows, I thought was a really great way to celebrate that record after 30 plus years. But then when you do the second half, it's Wiser Time, No Speak, No Slave, and Soul Singing from Lions, which is a record that I think is a really wonderful record, but didn't really get the attention that it kind of deserved for whatever label, drama, whatnot reason. So in a way, that tour actually connected that efficiency with the larger body that you had going through into the next century.
I agree, and I also think that it just rekindled this other thing as well about what we feel about rock and roll, rhythmic things, like you said, like that. Bedside Manners comes out pretty hot, you know. And when he played me that riff, it was a little longer. The riff, you had like another part, and we were at my house. And I said, oh, just play this and then repeat that. And then it was like, boom. That was the last song we wrote until we went to the studio. It was like the newest sort of thing that no one had really heard. But I think overall, doing that record, you know, at first I had trepidation, like, oh man, are we that band, man? You know what I mean? Like, are we going to do like, they're playing their first album. And then when we started it, though, I was like, this is amazing. This is, you know, the thing that, like, wow, that really was the binding of, and like I said, like, oh, wow, this is what we love. We like this high energy. We like this kind of funk and this rock and this kind of like sound that we started from. And then that opens up all the other stuff too. Like, oh man, you know, all the stuff, Fats Domino and Little Richard and all the R&B, all the early rock and roll, all the punk rock, all the stuff that we really loved that used to really fire us up. I mean,
because whenever you did covers, they were all over the map. You know, I saw you do "Hey Grandma" by Moby Grape, which you know, greatest debut album ever. No disrespect intended.
Jerry Miller sat in on that with us one time,
you know,
which was
doing
fantastic.
the Velvets after Lou passed away. You know, the way that you've taken covers and sort of reintegrated them into the thing after you draw from them. Doing "Boomer Story" by Ry Cooder. It's a way of pledging allegiance, but also saying, okay, this is the road we start from. And that's why a record like this feels as strong as it does, because you're hearing a lot of that early influence, so that the things that were digested become your own. It becomes your voice.
Yeah.
It was always at the seat of our pants, like I remember opening for ZZ Top, and we decided to do a medley of Shake 'Em On Down, Fred McDowell, into I Want to Take You Higher. And
By the way, we have like the #1 record or something, and we're like, we'll get to that later.
We'll get to the hits later.
And we had our merch guy.
We were
come up
fired
and
from
sing.
that tour, by the way.
We were fired. But our merch guy came up and sang background, and so that's just what we did. Kevin Wegman got up there and put a hat on and was like singing.
On the handful of ZZ Top shows you got to do.
It was like, what did we play? 40 minutes or
Yeah.
something. And that was a long medley. By the way.
We got fired from Aerosmith. When we opened for Aerosmith in 1990, they fired us the first night. No one knows. We opened with like this weird.
Thought it would be great. We wrote this song. It's called "You're Such a Pity," and it was like this dirgy, 10-minute long thing. And the first night opening for Aerosmith, we opened with it.
And they were like, "What the fuck are these guys doing?" I think at one point I had like a knife and I stabbed the knife in the stage and was looking at everyone. And they're like, "We want to hear Hard to Handle." You know what I mean? The fuck are these guys doing? And our manager like, "What did you do? What did you do?" You're fired. I'm like, really? I mean, all right, we'll play Stare at Cold tomorrow. All right.
So in other words, when you got fired by ZZ Top, you had practice.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Oh, okay.
We have great practice of being fired. Yes.
Well, actually, talking about Lions, Rich, you once said that Lions was one of your favorite records by the Crows. What is it about that record that you like? Because it is not one that comes up as often as it should. It's sort of in that weird netherworld.
The problem with Lions is it just doesn't sound that good, but the songs I really liked because we had come off touring with Jimmy, and then I scored this movie for New Line Cinema. It was called Highway. And so I was in the studio and I hired Charlie Drayton to play drums.
Oh yeah.
And it was me and Eddie, and Eddie played keys and Charlie Drayton on drums. And I scored this whole movie, and the director was a young kid, and he was like, "Just do whatever you want." And I'm like, "All right,
Thank you."
Cool." And so we had strings and we had everything, and I got to really play and delve deeper into more sort of orchestral things, and looking at music from a cinematic standpoint. And so I think there's a lot of that in Lions.
Yeah.
And if you think about songs like Soul Singing, and you think about Lay It All On
Miracle
Me,
to Me.
Miracle to Me, and all of these different songs, it's in there.
Soul Singing actually does have a cinematic quality. It is like going to church. And there's that line, actually, "I've traded my black feathers for a crown," which is a nice bit of self-reference, but it also gets to the point of what it feels like when you're singing or playing guitar or giving a performance as a band where you've actually transcended the physical realm and you're in some place that you haven't been to before.
Right.
And that line actually sums up what you aspire to every night.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. It's funny when I use words like adventure or whatever about the life, it's a sacrifice. It's a commitment. It makes relationships difficult. It makes a lot of things. I'm not suggesting. I mean, everything takes work. Everything is, has a dynamic. But for me, it's funny too. I believe in the muse. I believe the muse is a real thing. The muse, in my case, is a feminine deity. And I do know one that, it's been problematic. It was problematic when I was a student, because I'm not always firmly rooted onto
Really?
the earth, because I'm dreaming. But if I removed myself from that and I didn't, she would leave. Those moments of I honestly believe that. I wouldn't have access to the things that I need when I need them.
You need to hold her hand.
I need to bow down in front of her.
Yeah.
I need to worship her. And I need to make my ritual be a part of, to have her gift me things when I need them.
How would you characterize what Jay Joyce brought as a producer to Happiness Bastards? Given that he comes from a deep commercial country background. He's a Grammy winner. He's worked with Keith Urban, Miranda Lambert. Was there a logic to that choice? You did record the album in Nashville too, which is about as country as a rock and roll band can get.
It's more about where Jay came from.
Mm-hmm. He's a rock and roller.
Early, that's what he was.
Yeah.
So I think we connected on that point.
Put your mic by your mouth, please.
Oh, sorry.
He's not the singer, you are.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Jay was brilliant in the way he dealt with Chris and I. He got what he needed, and he was never a dick, but he was just like, yeah, let's try that again. You know what I mean? Which was kind of cool, you know?
He was fantastic about figuring out the dynamic, because I'm like all over this shop, you know what I mean? But what do you do? Play there. Play that again. Wait a minute, take that. Is that purple? Is that purple? I like purple. Oh my God, you know what I mean? And Rich is like more methodical and like, so he was great because he is going to interject as well as a producer. And like you said, he's, making records also should be fun. You know what I mean? And like, we had a lot, we made this record in 2.5 weeks and it's done. And we worked hard, but he was great. Like he knew how Rich operated. He figured out whatever I was.
Yeah.
And then he could interject his energy and the way he likes to deal in the studio. The one thing I will say that is hilarious, he has a lot of assistants. So if it was like, oh, let's change amps, it was like a NASCAR like cruiser. There were like 15 guys running around. I'm like, holy shit, are we paying for all these guys? You know what I mean?
The answer to that question
I was like,
is
God,
yes.
the lunch bill is going to be huge. I mean, the catering alone. I was like, what are we, Pink Floyd? Fuck. But he he likes to work fast, and that was really.
They were all unpaid interns, so it was cool.
Yeah. But don't tell them. They thought they were getting paid, and we have nothing to do with that.
Well, it's interesting because you had Steven Tyler come out and sing with you in London back in May. He came out and did Mama Kin, and Jimmy Page was there, and he did some sort of social media.
Jimmy Page was there making everyone nervous, taping us on his phone. Jimmy, you're giving me anxiety.
But one of the ironies that
when you have Steven Tyler and Jimmy Page watching you from 10 feet away, you fucking have to be good that night.
But it also meant that you actually performed with Steven in one of his last times on stage.
Yeah.
With the
I hope
Aerosmith.
that's not the case.
I hope that's not the case, but for the time being, he's a bit of out of commission. How do you see yourselves as a band carrying something forward at a time when a lot of the people that were really important to your gestation are either gone or they're reaching a point where they, as in Steven's case, maybe they can't do it anymore. Yeah, the Stones are out there, Springsteen's out there, but the march of time comes to everybody. In a sense, you're actually at a point where you're actually...
What did you say, David? Maybe this year would be better.
Don't laugh. After 40 years of going to your gigs, I've got that problem.
No, that's a good question.
But, it's like you're actually now delegated to be the thing that you aspired to because they were able to give you
I think that's a part
the
of Shake
original
Your
map.
Moneymaker, the tour. And, for me personally, just to, I kind of came to a realization like, okay, I've done a lot of things, but what I feel that I'm supposed to be is the front man that you see today. And you've seen it. If you've seen us, thank you very much. And when I look at that, I realize it's maybe anachronistic to children. I don't know, to young people. But when you have Mick and you have Steven, Robert Plant, these kind of, Rod Stewart, you have these flamboyant kind of characters. I think what I do is maybe a little different because I like.
But also, there's an element of exploration and pushing forward. Making a record like Before the Frost, the Freeze. I always get the two confused. Or Amorica. Even just Southern Harmony. The way that was just such a hard turn after moneymaker. And yet what you've done is you've toured with Oasis and you've played with Jimmy Page. You know, Rich, you played with Patti Smith. Chris, you've sung with Phil Lesh and Friends. You know, you were on Further, you know, one of those original jam band tours. So a lot of what you do is beyond the basic sort of DNA.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big part of what that role is. You know, all of the expansion that your inspirations did, you're both beholden to and also actively expanding that.
I mean, yes, you know, I mean, I think it's a.
Are you conscious of it? Like, are you aware of it?
Yeah.
Like when you play with Patti, like, are you aware of exactly, you know, what you're doing and how it works with her poetry, her singing, and her whole concept of what music and creativity and spirit is?
I mean, yeah, and even how we met. You know, I worked with a bunch of people that had worked with Patti. Like, I had her band with me for a couple of shows, and her tech, Barry, we were talking about Barry, and Barry was like, man, if you ever see Patti, she's so cool, just go say hey. And I'm shy, and I don't really do that. And she was eating in this restaurant, and I was like, shit, she's right by the bathroom. I'm gonna walk by her, like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I don't wanna say anything, and I was in there, and I was like, fuck, I guess I should say something. So I came out, and I just said, hey, Patti, you know, my name's Rich, I know Barry and all these guys, and couldn't have been sweeter. And that was it. And I was like, oh, you know, I was like relieved. I was like, all right, I said, hey, whatever. And she was sweet. The next day I get a call, and I didn't know who it was, and I said, hello? She goes, hey, it's that girl you met at that bar yesterday. And I said, what? She goes, it's Patti Smith. And I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? And she goes, listen, I called my son. I told him I met you, and he told me if I didn't play with you, I'm an idiot. So you want to come play on my record? And I was like, fuck yeah, I'll come play on your record. And she goes, well, I met you. When I looked up at you, she goes, I fucking hate Paul Simon, but Paul Simon was playing. And it was like Man in the Bubble.
Boy in the Bubble.
Boy in the Bubble. He's like, so she says, let's do that. And she wanted to do an Allman Brothers song. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And so in that same sense, it was really...
I never heard this story.
And so,
See, you got to come to me for this stuff.
you never asked.
We're not going to therapy anymore. We're just having David
We're just
over.
going to sit with David. But the cool thing about that was just how free it was. It's just free.
Yeah.
Everything is, you know, running in the field. Everything is throwing the football. And that's the amazing thing that's kind of getting lost. Like, the one thing we can do is we can get on stage and we can play. I remember touring with Neil Young and then taking a break to go play with AC/DC. And it made sense to us. There's not another band on the planet that could play shows with Neil Young and then go play with AC/DC and then come back.
That's very true.
You know, and that's it. And we've handled it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also Herman Hesse. It's Steppenwolf. It's the magic door.
Yeah.
You know, the magic door is there if you see it.
Pretty good band, too.
Yeah, very good band. AM radio band, so they don't get they're not the Doors. You know what I mean? Doors are AM radio band too. But I think that idea of the novel, you know, to be able to, when something arises, you step through the door. It says entrance, not for everyone, but it doesn't say don't go through. It's just, are you going to go through, or are you going to stop?
Yeah.
You know, or you're not going to take advantage of. And magic is, you know, is real too.
Like
that's
said,
magic things.
And like you said about a more, you know, Shake Your Moneymaker. We made that record. I was 19. You know, I started playing guitar when I was 15. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew how to write songs. And so we made that record, and then Southern Harmony, we basically made a live record, and then Amorica were like, let's make a studio album, and let's take a year to make a record. And then Three Snakes was an acoustic record made, and it was home, and it was organic. And I bought this board, this API board, and we rented a house in Atlanta. We made it, and then By Your Side was a straight-ahead rock record. So we were never afraid to try and kind of go through all, you know, well, let's make this kind of record, let's make this. We were never kind of bogged down.
It's just whatever songs we're doing.
Whatever the songs dictated.
But then, you know, the music business rears its woolly head in there, and it's like,
But in a
no,
way,
but no,
you
you're a
almost
riff
had
rock
to deal
band.
with
You
the
have to
business
sound like this.
aspect of it more seriously than, say, the Stones would have, because if you look at Aftermath, Satanic Majesties, Between the Bustins, Satanic Majesties, Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed,
Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street, an extraordinary run. The songs are all written by the same two guys. The rhythm section is the same. Every one of those records sounds entirely different.
I mean, you say that about Led Zeppelin records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In the exact same way. And I think, again, we live in this world now where like it's talent shows and vote for me. Vote for me. No one was voting for us. You know what I mean? Like you got in a band because you were like the worst people at the school. They're bad. You know what I mean? Like I am bad. I fucking
Hey,
better
we got
believe
fired by
it. You know what I
Aerosmith.
mean?
That's how
Why
fucking
don't nice
bad we
girls
are.
like me? You know what I mean? Like
We actually almost
were
got
bad.
fired by
We were
Junkyard too.
What?
We almost got fired by Junkyard too.
Oh yeah, our
The
very
first tour we ever did,
Yeah.
we showed up and they started putting our name ahead of Junkyard as the headliner, and they were like, "Fuck these guys!" I mean, we didn't.
We were like, I didn't-
we got more airplay.
We don't even have a ladder in the van to change the marquee. We didn't do it.
We were almost fired off for more tours than anyone.
Actually, that'll be the subject of our next interview. People we got fired by. I could do this for days, and matter of fact, I have done it with them for days. But I'm going to give Vox Populi a chance here. So if you got anything you want to ask the brothers,
Make
this
it
is your
good.
chance. Yeah. Remember, you're following me. This gentleman here.
Hi, how are you? Hi, how you doing? I just want to thank all three of you. David, you're the reason I'm a reporter today. And to the two gentlemen here.
Are you a reporter because you don't have the word press on your
No,
hand?
I don't.
Because I think you should do
He's
that.
a reporter if he's not making any money.
No, very true, very true. And the Robinson Brothers, you guys, the soundtrack of my existence. So thank you so much for that. Yeah. So thank you so much for Happiness Bastards. Really excited about the record. I saw you 3 times on the tour already. I wanted to ask you, you guys were apart for a while, and you hadn't written together for a long, long time. So there's obviously a dynamic and a chemistry between you that's so unique. That goes, your partners, your brothers, there's so many things there. When you were coming back after all that time, was there trepidation or nervousness on your side to see if that thing that you have that's so unique is still there?
No.
Nice. Yeah, there was that much confidence. Well,
It's not confidence. It's just a thing.
a thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's not an arrogance I was being cheeky, but
Yeah.
no, it's and I think it gets back to Shake Your Moneymaker. We didn't bite off like new shit either, so we had a little time to see how it was going to work with us, But no, that's what we do,
Gentleman over there. Hold on, we got a mic, so we're doing it official.
Here it comes.
Like this, Rich?
That's good.
I think we're all hoping for continuation of anniversary box sets with Amorica. If we do, how about a keyboard-only track of Descending? Does that even exist?
It exists if you turn all the other instruments off.
You asked him. I don't know if that exists.
No, he never played it on his own.
No, it's from the track.
Yeah, yeah,
we tracked
it
it
was
like
from the
that.
track.
Yeah, Eddie didn't.
And he did it in one, he was like a single take thing, but he did 10 takes, but there was no cutting. You know what I mean? Like,
It's
he
not
just
like
did
it wasn't on the computer,
Yeah.
And it was funny because Ed Harsh, who we love and we miss, my drug professor. But the one thing about Ed that's true is that every great thing on, if you like our records, every great thing that Ed did was the first take. And he'd be like, oh man, let me try that again. And then it would be fucking horrible. And he'd be like, wow, that wasn't as good. Man, let me take another stab at that. And then it would be fucking worse. I don't know what it was about. The most talented motherfucker in the world But he got that shit right the first time, and then we'd be there for an hour like, Jesus Christ. We have it. Ed, we have it. Plus the playback. It's done. Like, give me 20 more times. I'm like, damn, you shouldn't have played it so good the first time.
Well, you've actually done the box sets for Moneymaker and Southern Harmony. I'm assuming that's next on the runway?
Yeah, the Amorica thing is, it's in the cauldron as we speak.
And that's really an interesting period because it's actually kind of broad because it takes in those sessions that were part of that period that came out. I guess it's the Lost Crows part of it.
Yeah.
And so that was actually a really
we made
creative
we
period.
made a whole record and then canned it. Yeah.
It was a really creative period, and yet you were sort of in this weird box with record label stuff and trying to, basically deal with people's expectations after Moneymaker, after Southern Harmony. It's both an enviable place to be because you have all the indulgence and the freedom, and it's the worst place to be because if it's not working, everybody's going to say, well, they're toast.
Yeah,
they had their moment.
I mean, they were saying that a lot.
They said that with Southern Harmony.
Because
it didn't sell 7 million albums. It only sold 4, and they were like, we got a problem.
Yeah, you guys are
Right,
old.
that's really sad.
shit.
I'm like, Rich, you're
only
23
4
years
million.
old. Hang it up.
But yeah, but we didn't give a shit.
I
That's the
mean, it's funny thing. We
really
live in a
didn't.
corporate world, and everyone cares, and everyone wants your vote, and everyone wants your dollar. And and we're capitalists, I get it. But you know what? Rock and roll, when we came up, a big part that was appealing to us was, I don't have to fucking do anything you say. You know what I mean? I had it out with many people over the years. One of the famous stories were on Saturday Night Live, the second time. We played Sometimes Salvation, and the guy wanted us to play Remedy. And it was a big record, and we had just written nonfiction, and I said, let's play nonfiction. And by the way, this is when Rich and I are completely together on this. The guy's like, you can't do that. I said, yeah, we can do whatever the fuck we want to do. He goes, you're making a big mistake. I said, that might be true, but that's our mistake to make, not yours. That's what I told him. I said, hey, man, next week you have, the
Elvis
whatever.
Costello will come on and he'll change
or whoever.
the set
You have
list,
a million bands in your season. We have one band. We'll take our chances with our own decision making.
Yeah. Because
And then-
when
and then
when Elvis did that thing with Radio, he's supposed to play Allison, and he plays that instead. A huge uproar. And my reaction is like, actually, Radio is the better song.
Yeah.
That was the
agree.
right choice to make as a performer and
But
in that moment.
I think part of that is it may sound like, again, just arrogance or what, but it wasn't. It's us trying to be free. We were trying to be ourselves.
You got to carry your own weight. They're not going to
But
carry it
at
for
the
you.
end of the day, that's why we're bad capitalists.
The
We're
perfect role
capitalists. We're
models.
just bad capitalists.
We're just bad capitalists. We're capitalists, but we're bad at it.
But what I told them earlier, though, because you know why? Because we were bad kids.
Let's do one more from the floor. The lady with the red hair.
The Lady in the Red Hair and the Happiness Masters T-shirt.
Will y'all pass this?
So I definitely have to say you guys are my favorite songwriters. I actually have your lyrics tattooed. Did you ever like a bad dream? Sometimes life is obscene.
Oh, okay.
So
I
do
bet your
have
mom
that.
and dad were stoked about that.
She hated it. My dad and I met you guys though. But what is your favorite lyric that you wrote, and what is your favorite riff that you wrote?
Oh my God. I've yet to I don't know. One thing I say that I like, I don't know if I have a favorite, but on Wanting and Waiting, I really like the line that says, I'm cold to the touch, mortuary style. Just a little something I threw in there. I don't know, I just thought that was like, when I wrote that line, I was like, fuck, that's cool. You know what I mean? I was like, no, you know
Sort
what
of
I
like
mean? I was going to
man,
rhyme
I'm
whiskey
good.
with frisky, but I went with that. Thank you.
Riff
And
time.
that's very cool that you have it.
Riff, that's a tough one. But I would say a song that I've never gotten sick of playing is Thorn in My Pride. It's enough to say, right? That's it.
And
I don't need to expand.
When you gave him that riff, was that title, that line, one of the first things you came out with?
That was another one. Just instantly, it wrote itself. You know what I mean? It wrote itself. And I introduced that song a lot by saying this song is a song that's like born of like a dream that starts as a kid into music and poetry and literature and art and being bad. And then that dream is still the thing that is like here. It's the engine. You know what I mean? And it doesn't take away from life and all the regular stuff that we all deal with. But we're unbelievably lucky to have that place in our life to inhabit and to experience the world through that space, you know, the lens of that. And so of course the dyslexic person is going to say, not thorn in my side, it's a thorn in my pride. You know what I mean? That was the first thing.
But that makes more sense.
Yeah, I hope.
Well,
And by the way, we even got a nod from Noel on that one. CC, remember that?
Oh yeah.
What was the song?
It's on Standing on the Shoulder.
Standing on the Shoulder.
Oh.
It was he sings "A Thorn in My Pride,"
Right.
if I need my remedy, you know. And he was like, I wrote that, you know.
shout out.
I said, you know what? You shouldn't have told me that because I'm going to talk to my attorney now. And I'm going to get some of that sweet, sweet Oasis money. Good capitalism.
This is a story still in progress.
Is I going to get paid in dollars or pounds?
It's time for some music. The tour is in progress. The album is Happiness Bastards.
you.
Chris and Rich Robinson, the Black Crowes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Time to do your thing.